Welcome to the All Access Entertainment Podcast. I am your host, Joseph Bruen, and here this week, a very special guest, one of the kings of New England. He is the Hurricane, John Walters. John, thanks for joining us today.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you. Just FYI, I'm on the West Coast, so it's a little earlier, so I'll be drinking my coffee while we're doing this.
Oh, no worries.
All right.
I get it. So we appreciate you being here. We're going to take a deep dive into your career and all that you have accomplished. And, let's rewind back to the very beginning. Growing up as a kid, when did you first discover pro wrestling? Who were some of your favorites?
Well, as a child, I always knew that pro wrestling existed. I think everybody was aware of it, but never really became a fan until it was right before WrestleMania 4. So what year was that, 86 or 88?
88, yeah.
Yeah, 88. I remember going, I tell the story a lot, went to my aunt's house, and my cousins were watching it, and they were doing the year-in review right before WrestleMania. And that was it. After I watched it the first time, I became hooked, and never really considered it as a career until I was probably 18, 19, and then I started when I was 20. But until then, I was just a fan.
And when did you first decide that you wanted to give it a go and get involved yourself?
It was never really an option because I was very thin. I think I graduated high school weighing like 150 pounds. So I was always very underweight, undersized. It was just a genetic thing. Then I started hitting the weights my senior year in high school because I decided to play football. And I bulked up a little bit and probably gained about 15, 20 pounds just hitting my growth spurt, hitting weights, dieting properly. And then I went to college and then did college for about 2 years. I did 4 full years of college. But after my sophomore year, I decided that I wanted to give it a try because I had bulked up a little bit and maintained my weight. And I said, yeah, at that point I was going to try it. So I started contacting different wrestling schools.
So you'd wrestle all over. Let's talk about the training itself and how you first got involved there.
So I had reached out to a bunch of different wrestling schools. I remember sending letters. At this point, emails were still, it was just kind of in its infancy, the internet, right? When I was junior in college, it was starting to kind of boom a little bit. So there was more ways to get in touch with people. But early on, I was kind of still writing letters because you can ask my friends who know me very well. I was very anti-technology for the longest time. I had a flip phone up until I was in my 30s. So didn't really embrace technology. But back then, even if I had, there was still limited ways to get in touch with people. So I had written a bunch of letters, and it only made sense to go to a wrestling school in New England because I was still in college and I didn't want to drop out of school. So Kowalski was one of the first ones to respond. It was one of those kind of letters that you could tell was an automated letter, that it was just pre-written and signed. And he said, I'd be happy to train you. So that was it. Junior year, I took the drive to Malden and met with him. And then I think maybe a week later, I gave him some money and started training.
What personal memories do you have of Walter, working with him, the interactions and how he was as a trainer, some of the insight that he had?
I think most of the people have the same stories of Walter. He was old school. He was vocal. He was, not politically correct. He would crack dirty jokes and inappropriate stuff at the wrong times. He would interrupt training in the middle of a match to start telling you you're doing something wrong. But that old school approach is, I think, also why his school was so successful, because the Kowalski guys back then before me, and then the guys that I trained with, were always really well polished in the basics and fundamentals and ring conditioning, and they had a reputation throughout the country. If you were trained by Kowalski, that you were definitely, you knew what you were doing. And he was, Mike Hollow was the head trainer. And of course we had other trainers at the time, like Dukes Dalton and the Boston Brawler, Jerry Bowser. Those guys were there helping lead class. But Mike Hollow was really the guy who really took the lead when it came to drills. But Walter would help you. If you needed anything and wanted him to show you stuff, he would. But at the time I started, he was limited. He was getting older and he was limited in his ability, but just a really old school gym, boxing ring, no air conditioning, no heat. It was just real old school, and you knew you were there to train. You weren't there to goof off.
Yeah. Well, 2004, you'd work in Ring of Honor with Nigel McGuinness, and then you'd go on to work with him many times over the years. What are your personal memories of working with Nigel?
I always told people I thought Nigel was one of the best wrestlers ever. And I think I watched his documentary that he did, but it was so long after he did it. It was just on my list of things to do, and I never could get a hold of it. And then I remember that it was on YouTube, and I watched it one time, and man, he was so good. He was doing a lot of innovative stuff. Him and Doug Williams really kind of brought that English style to the States. And I think Nigel he put his own little twist on it. I don't think I had one bad match with him. He was just very polished, very rugged, and a really nice guy. And I know that his injuries prevented him from going to WWE, because I think he was signed, if I'm not mistaken. And then the injuries were the reason they didn't end up signing him. But no, he was awesome. And if I see him to this day, still the same person. Charismatic, funny. He does magic on the side. I don't know if you knew that or not, but yeah, really awesome wrestler. Nothing bad to say about him.
And a year prior to that, 2003, also in Ring of Honor, you would work with John Xavier, John Xavier, the late John Xavier. Just a great guy, one of the greats in the business. What's your feedback on John and relationship with him?
Yeah, I actually still get messages from people that talk about my match with Xavier from 2003, the Fight Without Honor match, where we just did so much stupid stuff. Like I'm surprised I'm alive after that match. It was just long rivalry we had. Gabe Sapolsky, the Booker of Ring of Honor, matched us together, and we had this rivalry where I was kind of the new guy, and Xavier was the guy, established star in Ring of Honor. He had already been champ at that time, and it was kind of just one of these. Boston versus New York, bad guy versus good guy. It was really kind of classic booking in Ring of Honor, which didn't happen much, where he was just picking on me and he kept beating me and fucking with me. And then eventually the Fight Without Honor was the big blow off where I finally, won. But yeah, he was another one who every time we'd get to the arena, he wanted to have the best match of the night. He was so focused on, we got to do this, and sometimes too much. But he really had passion for the business, and he was another one that was really old school. His stuff was believable. If you watch some of his old stuff, some of his knee strikes and chops, I mean, he really, and take it from me, he laid his stuff in. But yeah, really good guy. And he would keep in touch. He would send me Christmas texts, even 5, 6, 7 years after we wrestled. He would send me texts for Christmas, and I had talked to him somewhat recently before he passed, where he had said he was going to make a comeback and he wanted to team up with me. And I wasn't really interested at the time, but I said, oh, yeah, let's be in touch. And then I think he passed away, I don't know, maybe a couple months later. And that was a shock to everybody. Really sad.
Absolutely. One of the good guys in the business for sure. When it comes to Ring of Honor and your tenure there, was Gabe Sapolsky the one that was running the show the entire time you were there?
Yeah, I believe so. I don't know if Rob was still there or it was just Gabe. Sometimes these timelines get confusing and get a little blurry, but Gabe was the one that contacted me. Yeah. So Gary Capetta, WCW ring announcer, he was doing his book tour. I think this was in 2003, and he had spoke at the Chaotic School where I was training, and then a couple nights later, he was at Dan Maratti's show in, I think, Wakefield, Mass. And that was actually the first night Luis Ortiz and I actually wrestled each other, which went on to be a huge feud. That was one of, I think, our first match ever. And Capetta was there, and he saw it and really liked it, and he pulled me aside, gave me some pointers, and we exchanged information. And he was the one that contacted Ring of Honor, because at the time he was doing backstage announcing for them, or backstage interviews. And he contacted Gabe, and I had sent tapes before. Everybody sends tapes, but so much of that stuff gets kind of probably thrown on the floor and not looked at. But after Gary put in the word for me, I got a call, I don't know, maybe a couple of weeks later, and I ended up doing a match in Philly for them.
And how did that transition go for you from going from the New England promotions, to Ring of Honor, higher profile, in different areas, obviously, and what was the atmosphere like backstage?
Well, it was definitely time. There's only so much you can do in New England and or whatever region you're wrestling in regularly, where you get the same people over and over. I'm not saying that's bad and that you shouldn't wrestle in a region, but I think eventually you have to branch out, and especially if you want to get better, you have to wrestle guys that are better. And at the time, Ring of Honor had these top, the top independent stars. Locker room wise, everyone was cool. The only difference was in New England, it's like everybody's from that area. It's most of the people you trained with, whether it was from Kowalski School or another wrestling school in the area, they were pretty much all New England guys at that time. Ring of Honor, you had guys from all parts of the country, and then parts other parts of the world eventually. So it was you had to up your game. It was a little intimidating, especially for a kid that's only been in the business for 3-4 years. But it was fun. Definitely good memories. But you could tell it was a different level when you got back there.
And you always stayed in shape throughout your career. What was your workout regimen throughout your career?
Um, I've always been fortunate. I've been a naturally lean person. So for me, getting out of shape and getting heavy is not, I mean, I could, but it would take a lot of, I would say work, like not no work at all. Even if I'm the kind of person that can go on vacation, eat crap for a week and lose weight because I just have that. I've just always been naturally lean and feeding your muscles is a little bit harder. So I've just always, I don't really know. I mean, my specific workouts have always been, I've never really lifted super heavy. Especially now as I've gotten older, I don't lift heavy at all because it's just not good for your joints. But when I really tried to bulk up, I was lifting a little bit heavier, just making sure I was eating every couple hours. And it's kind of your standard thing. I came across a workout program in the early 2000s when I first started wrestling that kind of guaranteed muscle gain and fat loss. And of course I was skeptical at first, but after I purchased the program, I started gaining massive amounts of weight just by diet and proper workouts. So I've kind of stuck with that, not to a T, but I've kind of used the same philosophy and principles throughout my whole life. And man, I just tell people just try to drink a lot of water, limit stress, eat the right foods, and just try to get into the gym. Even if you don't know what you're doing, getting in there is the first step. And and you learn to know your body after a while. You just go in there and try things, and you're like, oh, last time I did this, it felt good, and I gained muscle. Let's do it again. So no specific thing right now. I just try to get in the gym 4 or 5 days a week and not lift like an idiot.
Right. Now let's talk about the gimmick itself. The Hurricane John Walters. Who is the Hurricane John Walters? Kind of talk about how you came up with the gimmick, the attire that you would wear, where you purchased the attire for, on a regular basis, where you would get it from, your entrance music, that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm. For me, it was a Hurricane. I think somebody in one of my college roommates kind of suggested it as kind of like a thing because we were watching the movie with Denzel Washington, the Hurricane movie, the boxing movie. So it just kind of stuck. And who I am, I was always just kind of this wrestling purist who I never really played to the crowd. I never really I would do dirty stuff when I was a heel. I would cheat a little bit, but for the most part, whether I was cheered or booed, I was always kind of like my style was the same. I'm going in there trying to win, trying to hurt people, and that was kind of it. I didn't really embrace too much of the flash, which to my detriment early on probably stopped me from going further. But I didn't want to fake who I was either. If that makes any sense,
Sure.
I was who I was. And as for gear, I just early on in your career, you're contacting these people and sending them random stuff, and they're making it, and you're receiving it a couple days before a show. You're like, well, I guess I'm going to wear it. But over time, I just tried to keep my gear basic. It wouldn't make sense for me to have super flashy gear and like a vest and a hat and sunglasses if I was just coming out being a pure wrestler. That never made sense to me. So
Right.
I just kind of embraced the traditional. Here I am. I'm going to wrestle and I'm going to beat you. And that's what I was comfortable doing. If I was ever offered big money to be some goofy character, for sure I could do it. But I was never booked for that. You know what I mean? When the New England promoters were booking me, they were booking me because that's who I was. So unless I had a reason to change, I never really did.
Any memories from Dan Marati and the MWF, which you mentioned?
I know a lot of people had issues with Dan. I know he had a lot of kind of heat with people. He always treated me well. No issues with me. He always treated me respectfully. The envelope was always given to me ahead of time, and always treated me well. Always put me in with quality opponents. So it's wrestling. There's always people that just don't like other people, or sometimes there's jealousy within promoters. It's really petty and stupid. But with Dan, I know a lot of people had issues with him, but not me. He was always really good to me and put me in with good opponents. And yeah, I don't know where that heat came from. I don't know if you know, but there was a lot of people who just didn't really care for him.
Yeah, I would always hear chatter. I never really paid attention to that. I don't pay attention to it in general. I try to stay positive and
Sure.
keep away from all the drama. But yeah, you do
Yeah.
hear it, and I don't know. I don't really know.
But yeah, I don't know. I talked to Luis Ortiz one time. He's like, yeah, Dan always treated me well. And same thing with like Todd Smith. And other people, yet there was always some people that just would always badmouth them, and I don't know. But that's, you know, I judge people on how they treat me. Um, so it's, yeah, always good memories.
Yeah. Yeah, I never had a bad experience with them, that's for sure. Well, when it comes to venues, you're traveling all over at this point. Did you have a favorite venue or a couple favorite venues, whether it be, maybe there's a hot crowd there normally or just the venue itself you like?
Mm. I feel like when Chaotic Wrestling ran in the the PAV in Lowell, it was, I don't remember which venue it was. It was in the Chaotic Wrestling, like Cold Fury, like 1 through 4 or 2 through 4 building. I think it was the Lowell PAV. Um,
I think you're
Man,
right.
that building, just not just because Chaotic had monthly shows there, just like some of my better matches, better rivalries were there, and it just, the crowd interaction, and it was the same fans, always vocal, always lively, and that's kind of where my career and kind of really started getting established. So I would say that building for sure. But throughout New England, I mean, like recently, I did some shows for Chaotic um, over the last year and a half, couple little runs for them, and I remember being in some buildings and saying, did I wrestle here before? So it starts to get blurry when you go back like 10 years later. And that's happened a few times recently where I've wrestled someone, I'm like, I think I wrestled here before, and they're like, yeah, you did in like 2001. It's like, holy shit, it's kind of wild how fast the time goes. But I would say probably that building. I'm sure there's some other ones, but I can't really think of them.
Ring of Honor 2004, now you would go on to wrestle Just Incredible. What was that experience like working with PJ?
I think I wrestled him in Ring of Honor twice. I think I did like a four-way match with him, and then I think I did a singles match with him, maybe somewhere in like Chicago or Minnesota. This is all kind of a blur. That was fun. That was the first time I had wrestled him, and I know PJ's had his issues, but he was always really good to me, always really giving in the ring. Never had any issues with him, treated me well, and then we started really feuding together for big time wrestling. We did like a kind of like a year long feud that ended up finishing with Flair. Flair was the special guest ref, and that was like the big blow off at the Webster Town Hall. But the matches in Ring of Honor, I don't really remember too much, but I definitely remember the feud with Big Time, because that's kind of where we were kind of leading the company. We were like the main rivalry, and the big blow off was Ric Flair was going to be at the Webster Town Hall, and I remember the place was so full and packed, and being in the ring with Flair, trading microphone stuff with him and punching him, and that was kind of surreal. But yeah, PJ was always good to me, man. I don't know. I know that he's, he had some issues. There was some no shows, and people saying that he was frauding fans, and I don't know how much of that is true. Again, I don't. The internet is a weird place. You can have 10 different people say something, and it can still not be true. And by the time a story goes from one end to the other, it's become, the fish is this big, right? So I like him. I always got along with him. No bad words to say about him, and I wish him well, whatever he's going through. But yeah, matches were fun.
Another gentleman you worked with 2003 for Ring of Honor was Chris Sabin, who obviously went on to big things as well. Working with Chris, what was that like?
Yeah, I don't remember. I don't think I did a singles. I think he was in that same match with Just Incredible, wasn't he? I think it was.
He was in the four-way, I think.
Yeah, it was me, him, Sabin, Just Incredible. And was it Homicide? Was it the other person?
It might have been, yeah.
Yeah, and I think that was the first time that I wrestled for Ring of Honor in New England. I think I had started for them um, maybe a few months prior, did some matches like in Philly and stuff like that. But that was the first like time that Ring of Honor and I were in Boston together. Yeah, Sabin, I mean, great. All I remember was a great athlete. I think this was kind of early in his career too. I don't think he had been around long. And to be honest, I don't even know if I've seen him since then. I might have. Again, you go do some of these shows and you don't even remember who was on it or not. But Sabin was a good dude, and Alex Shelley, another one. I know they went on to team together, and Shelley and I stayed in contact for a while after the Ring of Honor days. But good guys for the most part. Pro wrestlers are mainly good people, because the ones that aren't usually will get weeded out. The locker rooms usually will weed them out. But yeah, all I remember about Sabin, he was really fast, really good athlete. Other than that, I don't really remember too many specifics. That match is a blur.
What would you say was your biggest takeaway from Ring of Honor and working there?
Hmm. I feel like at the time when I was there, it's funny because I have a lot of notoriety from Ring of Honor. That's where a lot of people remember me from. But I don't think that was a time in my career where I was really that good. I feel like I got better afterwards. And it's not because it was Ring of Honor's fault, or it was, I think it was just the time that I was in the business. I started Ring of Honor maybe 3 years after I'd started wrestling, and I just don't think I was at my peak then. Yeah, I was happy with the matches I had, and I definitely got good publicity and good press from there. But I don't think that was. I just don't think I was ready. I think if I had gone a few years later, I would have been a lot better. But the takeaway was, I think it was too much. I think there was too many guys trying to reinvent the wheel every night, and there was, you had these 30-minute matches, and there was like 6, 7 of them every night. So the shows were too long. Uh, but God, I mean, some of those fans to the end would still be into it, which was amazing. The fans were more intense, they were more demanding, and I think because the fans were more demanding, the wrestlers took that as in that, hey, I have to do everything tonight, and I fell victim to that a few times too. But the main takeaway I would say is, it gave a lot of guys a platform, because if you look at so many of those guys that started in Ring of Honor or really got their buzz in Ring of Honor, look where they're at now. You can't
Right.
go to any of these major promotions and not see a guy at the top that was in ROH. So yeah, it was good. The Ring of Honor of today, not so much. I don't even think it's really Ring of Honor anymore, is it? It's kind of like just AEW watered down a little bit.
Right.
And I went there and did a couple matches for them over the past few years, and it just didn't feel like Ring of Honor. Maybe because you were in this big arena, maybe because the Ring of Honor originals weren't there. Maybe it was just it's just a different environment. And I think the environment of that day, almost, it was kind of like ECW, right? You felt like you were watching something different. I don't think that's there now.
Yeah, the environment played a huge role in Ring of Honor, I feel, just like you said, ECW, very similar.
Yeah, and it was all like tape trading back then. You couldn't really watch it on TV. So it was like almost this underground world of wrestling where just people knew who they were just from the tapes. And that's pretty cool.
Right. Eventually, you'd go on to become RJ Brewer. Why don't you tell us how that came about and what that character was all about?
So I think this was in 2000 and maybe 2009, 2010. I remember I moved down to Florida for a winter for the first time ever, and then I came back to Massachusetts for the summer. And I was kind of done with wrestling. I'm never going to retire. I always tell people that I'm just going to one day stop taking bookings, and I'm just going to be done. And that might be now. I don't have anything planned right now, and I don't intend on it. But when I'm back up in New England, I get into a ring and I feel good, and I can wrestle some safe people and give myself a reason to stay in shape. I might do some shows, but as you get older, pros and cons are weighed differently. And I'm getting to the point now where I'm wondering what's the point of taking any bumps. But I was kind of at that point in 2009 or 10. And then I got an email from somebody, and it was Alex Abrahantes, who was working for AEW recently. And he had just basically said, we're starting this promotion, and we've got a show in California on this date, and we'd like to talk to you about a character. And I didn't take it serious, because throughout your life in wrestling, any wrestler will tell you there's so many promoters. I'm going to run this show. I'm going to do this. I'm going to have this a big event. I want to use you, and it never materializes. So I just kind of blew it off and said, until there's a ticket in front of me, I'm not taking it serious. So he had said to me, well, Mark Jindrak is the head booker, and he wants to talk to you. So Jindrak called me, and after the phone call, I said, well, this sounds pretty legit. So yeah, I got the plane ticket. They flew me out to LA. And then we drove down to Palm Springs, California area, whereas ironically is where I live now. I've lived here on and off since 2015, but the arena we wrestled in is literally 10 minutes from where I live, and that's just kind of by coincidence. But yeah, they kind of fed me this character. They wanted me to play this anti-immigration character that was kind of a spinoff of Jan Brewer, who was the governor of Arizona at the time. Really strict on immigration, was passing a lot of strict immigration bills, and they wanted me to play her son. We never said I was her son, because I think that just we weren't allowed to do that. Although I think parody laws would probably have covered us. But anyways, they basically said, you're going to be RJ Brewer, you're going to be Jan Brewer's son, and you're going to go around with this message of that these masked Latinos don't belong here. I'm going to deport them. And at first, the character they fed to me was kind of like this frat boy, mama's boy type thing, and I kind of morphed it into my own thing, where I made it kind of real political and more kind of intense, and all these promos I would do, like I was on ABC Nightline, the LA Times interviewed me, Geraldo Rivera, I was in character all the time. So there was times where they really thought that I was this person, and that made for good TV. But then, like, sometimes even like backstage at some of some of these all Latino news stations, they would not like me. But
Yeah.
yeah, I was doing my job. I said, I'm not going to play this controversial character and then just go laughing around with everybody. The guys in the locker room knew who I was. I would speak Spanish with them, but when the cameras were on, I was on, and that was fun. That was probably the most fun I've had in wrestling because you got a real natural reaction out of people because immigration is a very personal thing to those people we were wrestling in front of.
Sure. And you were a big part of Chaotic Wrestling, obviously, over the years. What would you say your biggest takeaway from Chaotic was for being a part of
Well,
that group?
they're still in business and they're doing well, so that's a very good thing. I think Chaotic was the first independent company that really gave me a platform to do big stuff. You say big stuff independent, but I still think it was big because they were running 2-3 times a month. Most of the Kowalski guys were working there, so you knew the guys that you were wrestling were good and in shape, and you were going to have good matches, and it was a safe place to work. The locker room was really there was no bullshit there. Nobody that was a jerk or somebody that went into business for themselves was really going to last in Chaotic. So it was, yeah, it was a great place to work. I mean, you look at guys like Aaron Stevens, Luis Ortiz, Vince Vicalo, these guys that I trained with early in my career, and we were all allowed to just kind of go out there and be creative and do our own stuff. And yeah, and then after Jamie sold it to Chase, Chase has kind of continued it. And if you've been to any Chaotic shows recently, I mean, Chase has really put a lot of money back into the product, professional setups, walkway, lighting, highlight videos. And yeah, it's amazing that they're still in business. You can say it's a different Chaotic now because it's a different owner, but a lot of those elements are still there. And yeah, very thankful to Chaotic for sure.
In 2001, early on in your career for Chaotic Wrestling, you would work with Slick Wagner Brown. And you may not remember that actual match, but working with Slick over the years, what was that like?
Yeah, Slick was awesome. Him and I had really good chemistry in the ring from day one. In fact, when I joined Kowalski School after I was kind of advanced, Slick and I were always kind of paired up together to do drills. When Hollow said, "Okay, we're going to do this: drop down, tackle, leapfrog, run out the ring," Wagner and I would always kind of start the drills. We were real comparable in speed and size at the time. Excuse me. So we were the ones that were really paired up together. And because we were so familiar with each other, when we went to wrestle in front of live crowds, that translated to really good matches. And I mean, he's a clown. He's a goofball. He's fun to be around. He's vocal. He's funny. But in the ring, he was always on. So guys like him and Ortiz were those two of those guys that I could never really have a bad match with, even if I tried, because we trusted each other and we loved each other. So it was kind of easy to, you stiff somebody that you love, it's not a big deal because that's kind of the way you guys work with each other. And I work the same with everybody, but you can be a little bit more aggressive with people that because you know that they know who you are. They're not going to get offended by it. But Wagner was awesome. I know he's got a school now. In fact, about 2 years ago, I stopped by and helped one of his classes out, and actually wrestled one of his students, Ichiban, recently. And I think he's training people the right way. So nothing but love for Wagner.
Awesome. Good things to come. Now, you would go on to wrestle Dukes Dalton in Chaotic Wrestling 2001. Obviously, you've worked with him multiple times. What was it like working with Dukes?
Dukes is awesome, and Dukes is a very underrated mind for the business too. Um, in the early Kowalski days, and then when Walter and Mike Hollow moved over to the Chaotic School, Dukes was kind of I would say the assistant head trainer.
Okay.
But man, he just very knowledgeable. And when you wrestled with Dukes too, he was very giving. So, well, whatever you want to do. He never was pushy on, we're going to do this, we're going to do this. And he was old school. So if something didn't make sense, he would try to put a little twist on it without insulting you. So if you ask a lot of these guys that trained, they'll all have the same story, that Dukes was really good, really respectful, and a good trainer. Because you could tell he had this rough exterior, but you could tell he cared. And in the ring, same thing. He said, whatever you want to do. And another one who, unless you know him personally, you don't realize how funny he is. Because you see him at the wrestling school, and he was kind of, I wouldn't say a jerk, but he was really firm and kind of, intense, and it had that face where it's like, oh, he's in a bad mood. But then when you crack him, total goofball. He was, yeah, I love Dukes. Great guy.
Awesome. When it comes to fan interactions, is there one that sticks out over the years throughout your career?
One specific? No, not really. I think wrestling fans get a lot of shit, but they're for the most part they're very respectful. Of course, you're going to go to some regions, or it might not even be the region. It might just be one specific night that the group of people that are at that show are just disrespectful and um, assholes and trying to hijack the show and make it about them. But for the most part, wrestling fans are pretty respectful, and I've noticed a different shift in the fans recently. When I wrestled for in the mid 2000s, I noticed a lot more fans trying to hijack the show with their chants and goofing off and yelling stuff when there's silence. The past few years, the sporadic shows I've done, I feel like the fans have been a lot more respectful, and you don't really hear that anymore. Maybe it's just a new school wrestling fan. Maybe it's just the area that I'm wrestling in. I'm not sure what it is, but I've never had any issues. When I was doing the RJ Brewer character, I definitely had stuff thrown at me. I definitely had remember a full beer can was thrown at me one time, hit me in the knee pad and exploded everywhere. Food and stuff like that. That was the only time. I'm not saying I felt in danger, but if there was something was going to happen to me, it was at that point in my career because I was telling 10,000 people they didn't belong in the country. So what kind of response do you
Right.
think you're going to get? But on the independent level, never anything serious or anything negative. Little stuff, but we're wrestlers. You have to have thick skin and deal with it. As long as they're not physically trying to hurt you, let them chant what they want. I've never understood people that get upset at certain chants and whatever. They're paying their ticket. Let them do it.
Another one you go on to work with in Chaotic was Aaron Stevens, 2001, and obviously beyond. What was Aaron Stevens like in the ring?
Yeah, Aaron was great too. And Aaron was one of those guys who, when he made it to WWE and it became Damian Sandow, it's like a lot of people said, he deserves it because he had so many setbacks. I mean, he was there. He was in the Chaotic days before me. I think he started wrestling 2 years before I was. So he was there for a long time. He went down to Puerto Rico. I think he got signed and then got released, and he kept going back and forth. And I think he was getting strung along a lot. And when he finally made it, I think a lot of people were like, yeah, like he's finally got his payoff because he put so much time in. And Aaron was another guy who I think wrestling was the only thing he wanted to do. We never really hung out outside of wrestling, minus like dinners after shows. But I never knew him to have another job or do anything. Pro wrestling was the only thing he wanted to do. And I watched some of his Damian Sandow stuff because I don't really watch much wrestling anymore, but I did watch some of his stuff and it was good. And then when he got released, nobody really knew why. Even I had asked him at a show after he got released, and he said they really had no reason for it. And yeah, sometimes you see people and they have all the attributes, and then they get released, and you wonder, like, what are they looking for, right? I mean, I wrestled Dijak recently. I'm like, what else does a company want? He's big. He can work. He works. He's fast. He's strong. He's a good guy. He literally just goes home to his family and does whatever you want. He was easy to put a match together with. He's believable. I'm like, why? What else do you want in somebody? And sometimes the formula they use doesn't make sense. Sometimes it might be a financial thing. But yeah, Aaron was another one of those guys who I saw him from the beginning really kill himself to get there. And I'm glad he did. I don't know what he's doing now, but whenever I see him, it's like old times.
Awesome. And then another gentleman, Chi Cruz. You locked up with him 2002. Was the EWA.
Yes.
First, what was it like working with Chi, and what was EWA experience like for you?
Yeah, Cruz was great. He was one of those guys, I think, that if he really applied himself and worked other places, he could have gone further. Maybe he didn't want to, but very, very good. And, the double knee backbreaker was his invention. And I remember he always used to give me shit because I used it in Ring of Honor once. And after I used it in Ring of Honor, like everybody started using it. And his kind of whole thing is I'm the originator, give me my credit. And I do give him credit because he was very innovative. We wrestled up in Maine. And I don't know if we wrestled again after that, but I remember he was very fast, very good chain wrestler, and a good dude too. EWA was kind of like the Chaotic Wrestling of Maine at the time, where they had their kind of own guys that they used, but they would bring guys in here and there. And when I first started wrestling for them, I got to wrestle guys like Cruz and Adam Booker, Frankie Armadillo, Steve Ramsey, a lot of those guys there. They're homegrown people. And then when EWA started running in Massachusetts, Dr. Heresy started running shows in Southbridge. there was a lot of crossover. So the Chaotic guys and the EWA guys became close, and then a lot of the talents were working at both shows. But EWA was great. Like I said, similar to Chaotic, great locker room, no BS, just a bunch of guys who just want to have fun and put on good shows.
Any memories of working with Antonio Thomas in EWA?
Oh yeah, Tom and I had a bunch of matches. Tom was another one. Uh, Wrestling was the only thing I think he wanted to do, and Tom was very good. We had I don't really remember how long after me he started wrestling. I want to say he probably was started a few years after me, but Tom was another one who was always in shape, very, very giving in the ring, could go. I think we wrestled some 20-minute matches where neither one of us were even tired. And I was like, holy cow, this guy's literally, he would push you. He would push you to bring your game. You wrestle some guys, you're like, oh, this is going to be an easy night. And then you wrestle other guys where you say it's going to be an easy night, but it's going to be draining, not because it's a mind fuck, but because you got to be in good shape. And Tom was one of those guys that you really had to bring it with. And yeah, we wrestled in EWA, and I think we wrestled in New York for 2CW a couple times too. But yeah, Tom is another one. Awesome, really good human being. Number one, that's the most important thing. You don't hear anybody saying anything negative about him. And then yeah, really good, really polished in the ring too.
Any personal memories with the Chaotic regime early on when you were there? Milo Masterson, Jamie, Randy Miller.
Let's see. Well, I mean, there was four of them. There was, I think it was 4 or 5 partners who had bought Chaotic. And then Randy Miller and Jamie were the two that kind of stuck around. And then eventually Jamie was the sole owner. But yeah, they were just 4 kind of business guys who were wrestling fans. And they decided to start this wrestling company. And I think they pissed a lot of people off early on in the 2000s, early 2000s, because, they did this thing where they were signing guys to contracts, which was very unusual and not really traditional in the early days, but they were just trying to, I know their theory was you see the same guys at every show. Let's lock in these talents and give them guaranteed money, which at the time wasn't great, but they were running enough shows where I think it was worth it for them to do it. And that's the place I wanted to work. So I remember signing that contract early on, and that didn't last long. I think it lasted for like a year, but they were businessmen. They treated it like a business. And yeah, I don't know how many of them were true wrestling fans. Jamie was for sure, but I think the other ones like Randy and Milo and Ben, I don't know if they were really wrestling fans or they just did it and said, "Hey, we're going to start a wrestling company to make money." I don't know, but they treated me well. They put a lot of faith in me and made me their champ and really took care of me. So yeah, I have nothing negative to say, but their motivation behind opening Chaotic, I'm not sure. But all I know is that it's still around today, so they did something good.
Yeah, still going strong. Now, who would you say was the most influential, the most helpful for you personally early on in your career as you're out there, you're now out of the training, you're doing the indies? Who's kind of helping you along?
So there's a few people. Obviously, Kowalski and Mike Hollow, because they're the ones that trained me, taught me the basics. Hollow is one of those guys. I still keep in touch with him. I'll go up to New Hampshire and see him every so often when I'm home. And Hollow was very, very old school because if your foot positioning wasn't right or the way you hit the ropes was right, he'd make you redo the drill 30 times. He didn't care. But because of that mentality and that attitude, people were so polished and in shape. And you wouldn't see a lot of Kowalski guys or Hollow guys on the indies making mistakes or blowing up because he was so strict, almost like a military sergeant in these drills. So for sure, Mike was, like I said, Gary Michael Capetta, very, very helpful and influential. He would have me send me my tapes, my wrestling matches, and he would pick them apart, analyze them. Whenever I would go down to like New Jersey or Delaware, me and the Chaotic guys would go down. He'd give us a place to stay. He'd cook for us. He'd watch our matches, give us feedback, long email, detailed feedback in email about our matches. So Gary was another guy who really wanted to give back to the business. And I remember him, you'd thank him. You'd say, "Oh, what can I do for you?" You'd say, "Just give back to the next person." And I always took that to heart. So I try my best to get up to some wrestling schools on my own dime whenever I have an opportunity to help out, because that's how business gets better, when people give back. So I would say those guys. And then of course, like Rich Palladino, who's been my close friend for so long, car rides, trips. He's always, when I'm home, he'll always say, "Hey, you want to work for this guy and make a little money?" And So Rich, yeah, Rich loves wrestling. You know that
Yeah.
he's still ring announcing so many times a year, and it's quite amazing. And he's still good and still loves it. And yeah, I would say those three. But every person I've been in the ring with, or every promoter who's ever booked me, has contributed to my growth for sure.
That was actually my next question was Rich Palladino. You guys, have a great friendship. When did that friendship start where you guys got pretty close? And, any stories that you may have, any funny stories over the years or
Yeah, sure. Probably in the early Chaotic days, Rich was the one that recruited me. So he's the one that brought me into Chaotic. And I think just I think he told me that I'm probably the person he's announced for the most. So naturally, when you're around somebody, you're around somebody that many times, you're going to become friends with them. And Rich and I are very similar. We'll take road trips. We'll go to eat. I don't think we've ever had a disagreement or argument once because we're both kind of, hey, what do you want to do? Let's do this. Neither one of us are real pushy, and we just both have the same mentality. Let's go to the show. Let's get there safe. Let's get something to eat and let's go home. And there's never drama with him, never drama with me. So I think we just naturally had the similar personalities, and
yeah.
just being on the road in locker rooms together for 25 years, you just naturally uh, get a bond with somebody. Not everybody, it's like some dogs may love all dogs, and then they may sniff one and hate that dog and never want to be around it again. And that happens sometimes in wrestling. I don't have any heat or feuds with people because I just don't care enough to have that. It's like if there's somebody I don't like, I don't associate with them. But business is business. I don't think personal stuff should get in the way of having a good match. And I've wrestled some great matches with people I don't really care for, but that's irrelevant.
Yeah.
But yeah, Rich is a good friend. He'll do whatever you want. If you need a ride, you need something, he's there for you. And I think most people can attest to that.
What would you say the greatest challenge is as far as being in the wrestling industry?
Whew. For me personally, the moves, the execution of the moves, I was always a good athlete. That was easy. The psychology of matches, for sure, I would say is the most challenging for most people because when you're early on in your career, you're getting thrown so much information, right? You got to learn how to take a fall, hit the ropes, fall outside, speak on the microphone, play the crowd. But putting it all together like a movie where it makes sense and where the crowd gets engaged and invested in it, that was a difficult part for me. And I think for most people, if I'm at some of these wrestling schools or I'm at some of these shows, nobody says to me, "Hey, what did you think of that body slam? How do you take a body slam?" It's, "Hey, what did you think of the match? Did the story make sense?" And I think that's the most difficult thing because you can do one match in front of one crowd one night and they could love it. Then you can do the exact same match in front of a different crowd in a different city the next night, and they may not like it. And it's a mind fuck. He's like, I just did it and I got this great response. So a lot of times it's knowing the crowd that you're in front of, knowing who you are, and then just telling a compelling story with your opponent. And that's not easy. It's a challenge. So I think that for sure, for me, was always the most challenging thing.
In JCW 2003, you'd go on to work with Reckless Youth. Reckless Youth had a great reputation at that time, and he was climbing the ranks. What was it like to lock it up with him?
Yeah, and I think when I wrestled him, I think he was Tom Carter. He might not have been Reckless Youth. I think he was wrestling as Tom Carter at the time, but I could be wrong. Man, he was so good. I think Jim Kettner from ECWA, who did the Super 8 tournament, he always said that Reckless Youth was probably the best independent wrestler he ever saw. And I wouldn't disagree with that either. I wrestled him when he was a little later in his career, but man, he was kind of that innovator. I almost feel like independent wrestling people have taken it serious, but that era when he was there, it was almost like he had this buzz. I remember the magazines, right? The magazines that you'd see at CVS or the grocery store. You'd always see him in there,
Right.
and yeah, he was awesome. He was smooth. He was crisp and a really nice guy. I think I only wrestled him once, but I remember the match being really good. And again, he had been doing it a lot longer than me. So you're in there with this guy who's supposed to be like the measuring stick, and you're like, holy cow, this guy is good. Um, I wish I had more memories of the match. I think it was in some small little building in Jersey. Living in New England, driving down to Jersey, Philly, Delaware, Maryland, different opponents, you lose track because that was what 23 years ago.
Yeah.
It's like, holy shit, that was so long ago. But
Crazy.
little bits and pieces are still there.
Yeah.
Um, but as you get older, you're like, holy cow, I wrestled that person. Because if you had not brought it up just now, of course I remember wrestling him, but I would have probably never thought about it again for the rest of my life because you have so many memories over 26 years of buildings and drives and opponents that you almost forget everything. So I don't have many specifics, but yeah, he was awesome. Really good.
Another one you'd work with in 2003 for Chaotic Wrestling was actually, I'm sorry, it was EWA, was Johnny Curtis. That was actually 2002. What was it
Yeah.
like working with Johnny?
Yeah. Another guy who really grinded to get signed. I remember I wrestled Johnny Curtis up in Maine, I believe. And yeah, good match. I think, like I said, back then, I don't think I was that good. So I don't know. You look at some of these matches from back then now, you're like, holy cow, that wasn't that good. But back then, for being a guy that was only in the business for a couple of years, it wasn't bad.
Yeah.
But Johnny Curtis was another one of those guys, good guy, really stayed focused, really wanted it. And then he was down in Tampa. I think Kevin Matthews and I went down to Tampa one time and went to one of the FCW shows, and we saw him at his apartment. We had a little chat with him. I don't even know if I've seen him since then, to be honest with you. He's been doing a lot of indies now, and I think he's in TNA, right?
I believe so, yeah. Yep.
Yeah, but yeah, good guy, and he was part of that EWA batch of guys that was just good guys, good wrestlers, and yeah, not a bad word to say about him.
And you go on, Chaotic Wrestling 2003. You'd also work with two other guys, Arch Kincaid and, of course, the graduate Tim McNeely. Any memories of either of them?
Yeah, so Arch was one of those guys who Arch was not an athlete, and I think most people would say the same thing. But Arch's gift was his mouth. I mean, he could talk, he could cut these promos, but I feel like some of the promos he cut were a little too advanced for the crowds at the time, because you get these little kids and he's using these words that just nobody knows. The adults in the locker room don't even know what they mean. But he played this intellectual kind of goofy character who would kind of turn it on and become aggressive. I liked wrestling him. There was definitely times where wrestling him felt like a job, because like I said, he wasn't the best athlete. He was very heavy in the ring. He was kind of stiff, but as a person, great human being, never malicious. It just sometimes in the ring, you're like, holy shit, Arch, like loosen up a little bit. You know what I mean? But could talk, could cut promos, really cared about getting in shape, because I think he was not naturally in shape. I think he really worked hard to get in shape. So he started around the same time as me. I think probably within the same year as me. So guys like him and Jimmy Cash and myself, we were kind of started Kowalski's school at the same time. So I'll always have that bond with him. But yeah, outside the ring, we got along great. And inside the ring, I'm not trying to trash him and say he wasn't good. It was just his strength was his talking. But he put on some pretty good matches, and we had some matches that were solid. But I wouldn't say that if I had to pick somebody that I'm like, hey, I want to have a match and I want to go on the plane tomorrow and not hurt, it probably wouldn't be him. You know what I mean? But McNeely, I think McNeely was probably one of the more underrated wrestlers to come out of New England, because remember he was one of those guys early on. I think he was doing some of the dojo stuff, wrestling some of the WWE stars, and McNeely was very, very stiff, but in a safe way. I remember training with him at Kowalski's and then wrestling some matches with him. He was really intense and stiff, but he was a good guy. Weren't going to get injured, but you were going to feel it the next day. And Timmy was one of those guys I wish stuck around and became a trainer, because I think you talk to most of the guys in New England, they'll say the same thing. Timmy was very good at basics, and I think he just walked away from the business, and probably the most sensible thing to do. But selfishly, if he had stuck around and became a trainer, I think that would have been good. But really, really, really solid.
What was your experience like with Total Nonstop Action? You worked with Slick Wagner Brown there, 2003, I believe it was. Just the atmosphere there in comparison to Ring of Honor and some of the other promotions.
Yeah, I don't really remember how that came about. I think Wagner and April at the time were going down there. I think they drove down. I believe we drove. I don't remember down. Where were they doing the show in Tennessee, Nashville at the time? That was like when they had like their week. Yeah, this is when TNA was doing like they were actually TNA. They were doing their weekly show like in Tennessee. I think me, Wagner, and April drove down, or we flew. I don't even remember. But yeah, we did like a dark match, and it was good, and crowd liked it, and that was kind of it. That was a one-time thing. Nothing came from it. I don't remember much. I remember Larry Zabisco being there. I remember some of the independent guys. But I think this was before I started for Ring of Honor, if I'm not mistaken. But what year was it? 2001? 2002?
2003.
2003. So this was probably before I started for Ring of Honor. So I didn't really know many of those guys down there. Uh, yeah, I think any opportunity like that when you're a young kid, you're more excited and you don't really take it in, and none of it really registers. But no, it was cool. Like I said, I don't really remember much. I just remember wrestling Wagner, having a good match, and either driving or flying. I'm gonna have to ask Wagner which one we did because now it's on my mind if we drove or flew. But yeah, yeah, not many memories of it.
There's different ways of looking at it, but chiming in your inner fan, what would be your Mount Rushmore of pro wrestling? Obviously, it could be personal favorites, could be, whoever made the biggest impact, however way you want to look at it.
Uh, so like the four guys that belong on the top. Hogan for sure. Uh, Hogan and Austin. I mean, I can't picture anybody denying those two. And then after that, I mean, that's where things get tough because you have so many of those guys that are there, like The Rock and Cena, Randy Savage, Andre the Giant, Undertaker. It's like, who do you put up there? But if I'm putting mine because of the era that I watched, I would probably go with Randy Savage because he was one of my favorites. Look at WrestleMania 4, WrestleMania 5. That's when I started watching wrestling. So nostalgic reasons, I'm going to put him up there. And I'm probably going to say Cena because he was the top draw of the company for so long. How can you deny it? How can you deny what he's done for the business? I've always been a guy that's been big on like technical wrestling and like execution in the ring. And Cena was not this pure wrestling purist, but when you look at his promos and his selling and his energy and just having solid matches and solid stories throughout his whole career, I think he's got to be up there too. But of course, like guys like The Rock and The Undertaker, Andre the Giant, those guys all deserve mentions too. So this is just a personal preference thing. It's hard. If there was a Mount Rushmore of 10 people, it'd be a little easier to put them on there, but four just it's this there's so many people that deserve it and probably should be up there, but again, this is all personal stuff.
And then we have two fan questions that came in as well. So I want to
Okay.
take this opportunity, kind of ties in with that question there. So the first question was your Mount Rushmore of New England wrestling on the men's side, and then Mount Rushmore of the women's side of New England wrestling.
Oh god, the women's side I'm gonna have a hard time. Men's side of New England independent wrestling. Man, it's hard because do you count people that are in WWE now who have made it, or you're talking about just indie wrestlers? This is a tough call.
I mean, you probably
If
can if they started here.
Yeah, well, for sure, I would put Eddie Edwards up there. Eddie Edwards, I never had a bad match with him. Really, really good, and obviously went on to TNA. But I would say for independent wrestling, he's up there. I would probably put Ortiz up there too. And that's a personal bias because I've wrestled him. I'm not going to put myself up there because that's corny. Who else, man? It's tough to say. Maverick Wild was another guy, man, who was just very, very good in the ring and kind of a mainstay in New England. God, it's tough to say because again, I don't want to put anybody up there. I'm sticking to just indie guys now. I'm not going to talk about like the Kofis and the Todd Smiths and the Tommasos and stuff like that. Although they're fantastic, they've done their thing. But if we're just talking strictly indie, God, I don't even know who else to pick. I don't even know. I'm trying to think of the guys I wrestled back in the day. I mean, you got Alex Arion, you've got Wagner. God, I don't know. I'm going to probably say Ortiz, Eddie Edwards. Um, shit. I'm probably missing some main person just because my brain is fried. I'll go Maverick, Eddie Edwards, Ortiz, and we'll put Alex Arion on there too.
Yeah.
Those are my four.
All right. The Golden Greek.
Yeah. As for women, damn, I don't even know a lot of female wrestlers. Shit. Well, you definitely have Nikki Roxx was up there, right? She was a big New England independent. Belmont was another one, right? She was always up there. Alicia Edwards.
Yep.
And then, man, there's a lot of good females now. Now on the independents too. I wrestled Shannon Levangie, which I don't do intergender matches, but Chase talked me into it, and that girl is very, very good. I'm not going to put her up there now because it's still early, but I'm looking at like, longevity in wrestling. Man. Oh, we'll put Ariel up there. How's that? She's been
Yeah.
around for a long time too. Yeah.
So, when it comes to Luis Ortiz, obviously he is one of your greatest rivals. I think it's
Yeah.
fair to say. So, why don't you tell us about your feud with Luis over the years? You've had so many matches with him, and a lot of the fans look at that combination as one of your greatest combos there. So, um, all the feedback you have for Luis Ortiz, let's hear it.
Yeah, Ortiz and I remember when I first met him at Kowalski School. I didn't really like him that much, and it wasn't because I didn't think he was a good person. He was just very blunt and kind of forward in the ring, like, you got to do this, you got to do this. And I was like this young kid who kind of had thin skin at the time. This was my first. I had played college football, but wrestling was new to me, and I was like, oh, this guy seems like a jerk. But then once we got to know each other, he just shared the same intensity and passion as me. You just wanted things to look good. And Ortiz is very old school. You have a conversation with him, and he does not like a lot of the new school flashy stuff. He's very rigid, and wrestling's supposed to be a fight. It's supposed to look real. And him and I had a similar mindset. So when we first started feuding in Chaotic and throughout other companies, we both had the same, that same mindset of, let's just go out there and let's just beat the tar out of each other and be safe. And sorry, my dog's being a little annoying. Go relax.
Right.
And yeah, so man, Ortiz, good human being, good husband, good father. Outside the ring, I still stay in touch with him. Not that often. I try to, when I'm in New England, I try to get together with him once in a while. But Ortiz loved wrestling, loved studying tapes, the Japanese stuff, the Mexican stuff. And whenever you get to a locker room and you knew you were wrestling him, he said, I want to try this tonight. I want to try this tonight. His brain was always going. And I know that it kills him that he stepped away from it, but it was a smart move. He's got a family, he's got a real job, and putting that risk when you have a lot to lose is not worth it. But no, nothing but love for him. Definitely my favorite opponent, somebody I clicked with inside the ring and outside the ring. And some of those early Chaotic matches we had in that big rivalry, big feud, just, that's something I'm never going to forget. So he definitely, I would say, has had the most impact in my career inside the ring. Other guys, I loved wrestling, but he was the one I could have wrestled every night and not got sick of it.
So Mike Cruel, you would take him on in 2003. This was for ECWA. So we're at St. Matthew's Parish Center, uh,
Mm-hmm.
Wilmington, Delaware, for Jim Kettner. St. Matthew's Parish Center is one of those iconic, venues. We talked about venues. And at the end of the day, it's a gymnasium, but it's just got that special feel for a lot of people. What are your memories of working specifically in that venue and memories of Mike Cruel?
Yeah, and if I'm not mistaken, this was my first match with ECWA. And we'll talk about Gary Michael Capetta. He's the one that got me booked for that show because Mike Cruel was supposed to wrestle the Amazing Red that night. And Jim Kettner had reached out to Gary Capetta and said, do you know anybody that can fill in? And I was in town. I think I was in town visiting. I don't even know if I was wrestling. And yeah, Gary and I drove to Delaware together. And then after that started kind of a monthly thing, me wrestling for Kettner. And then Jim Kettner and Chaotic got connected and started doing talent exchanges. And Jim had a connection with the WWF at the time, WWE. So it was kind of all kind of magical. All the timing happened where I was in town and I went and wrestled for Jim, and Jim started using me on a regular basis. Chaotic guys started coming down, and then some of his guys started going up to Chaotic. So they became this partnership. But that building was super old school. And those were Jim's fans. That was Jim's building. Those fans, I don't think they knew anything. I don't even know if they were wrestling fans, but they were ECWA fans because Jim knew his crowd. He knew his characters. He knew exactly how to get the fans in the building. And that's why he was one of the more successful promoters of all time, because he had these guys that you probably wouldn't see on any other shows, but they were these big stars in that building. And like you said, the building was iconic. It was old. It was a gym, but so many things happened there. All these Super 8 tournaments, a lot of stars were born there. And yeah, wrestling for Jim was an honor because he was another one of those. He was one of the more respected promoters. And then he made it clear to me he did not want smart fans in his building except for the Super 8 tournament. That was the only time, once a year, he wanted smart fans there because he knew his crowd, he knew his audience, and he didn't want these family-friendly shows being hijacked by smart fans. So he would book them intentionally to keep those kind of people out. And he knew what he was doing. And Yeah, I haven't seen him in a long, long time, but apparently there was a ECWA reunion recently and he was there, and I wish I could have seen him. But yeah, Jim was great. Great promoter, great guy. And like I said, he knew exactly what he was doing.
Yeah, I'd say he's, in my personal opinion, one of the greatest promoters of all time. I mean, you
Yeah,
have
and
to.
go back to Mike Cruel. I didn't address that. Awesome, awesome wrestler, awesome guy. I think he stepped away from the business after WWE let him go. And wow, I mean, talk about a guy who was in shape, who was good in the ring, intense, fantastic. Yeah, Cruel was awesome. And I then wrestled him in Chaotic a couple times too.
So 2003, you'd go on to WWE. You'd wrestle for both Sunday Night Heat and SmackDown. Sunday Night Heat was from the Boston Fleet Center, and you'd work Aaron Stevens one on one, somebody obviously you've worked with before on the Indies. And then SmackDown, Manchester, New Hampshire, you'd team up with Aaron Stevens against Team Angle, Shelton
Mm-hmm.
Benjamin and Charlie Haas. What was it like being in those arenas, Manchester, New Hampshire? The Boston Fleet Center, being on something like a grand stage of that nature.
Yeah, and the Fleet Center match with Aaron Stevens was the first time wrestling in a WWE ring in front of a crowd that big. So it was intense. I remember uh, saying that telling people it was going to be Aaron Stevens and I remember Howard Finkel coming up to us and saying that I was going to be from New York and Aaron was going to be from Boston. So you knew that I was going to get booed right away. And we had a really good match. I think I botched something in there. I think there was one move that wasn't executed perfectly, but yeah, being in there, it's almost surreal because you train so long. Uh, you do these independent matches and you're like, oh, I got 10, 12 minutes, 8 minutes. You snap your fingers and the match is over. And I don't think when you're starting off, you're really taking it all in because you're kind of nervous and insecure. You're just kind of not going through the motions, but there's a big intimidation factor in front of that many fans too for the first time. I don't even remember much. I remember Aaron and I going out there having fun, having a good match, and the feedback was good, but I don't remember anything about the match. I don't remember. I just remember walking out and seeing 20,000 people and just almost shit myself, So especially being a young kid, and this is the first time doing it. The other match with Team Angle, I do remember that. That was a SmackDown match, and it was I don't know. It was weird that Aaron and I were on SmackDown. It was obviously like a job match. We didn't really get much offense in, but I think they were just building Team Angle up. And I remember taking a super kick from Shelton Benjamin, and I remember seeing it on camera, and it looked like he took my head off. But I remember it didn't. I didn't feel a thing inside the ring, and I was like, "Holy cow!" I thought he actually missed me. And then when I watched it back, I was like, "Holy cow!" That's how good Shelton Benjamin is as an athlete. But that was fun. That was cool. They were good. They were good guys. Intense. We were just kind of there as enhancement talent for them, which I did throughout my career many times. Enhancement talent isn't the ultimate goal for people, but if you're getting booked to do something, you do it, and you do it as best you can. And throughout the early 2000s, I did so much WWE stuff, and it was all fun, all fun. But when you can actually have a real match, that's more fun than doing a skit at a bar or being a cop or something. That's not what we train for, but that's what they need you for. You go ahead and do it.
Right. And actually, it's funny that you bring that up. I remember being a part of a skit, and it was the only skit that I was ever a part of. And it was actually at Tim White's bar, and you were a part of it as well. And it was
Yeah,
APA and Billy and Chuck. And, it is what it is. But it was, at the end of the day, it was fun. And it was just kind of nice to work with everybody on that level.
I do remember you being there. Yeah, I was going to ask you if you were there. I remember because it was a bunch of chaotic students and chaotic wrestlers and some other guys, and yeah, what was it? Billy and Chuck were there, and then the APA came in and didn't realize it was a gay bar, and then there was a big fight, and we all started screaming and ran out. Yeah, it was. Yeah, I mean, that stuff is not taxing on the body. It's fun, and again, if you're employed for a night and that's what they want you to do, you do it. It's nothing to be ashamed of. But ultimately, when I would go backstage and I would get like, oh, you're going to be a cop or security guard tonight, like that's not what I wanted to do. But
Right.
not going to say no.
Yeah.
So the matches, getting in a ring and wrestling was obviously something that I wanted to do. But the other stuff, the skits and stuff, that's just part of paying your dues, and it was all good. You go get a paycheck, get some catering, you know, have
Still
some
enough
fun. It
summer.
was, yeah, for sure.
Now, when it comes to agents, with those matches that you worked in WWE, do you remember any of the agents that were assigned to your matches?
Yeah, Arn Anderson, Fit Finley, Sergeant Slaughter, all those guys, just great, just great. Arn Anderson especially. I remember I wrestled Chris Masters, I think, in his second match on Monday Night Raw. And I remember Arn Anderson coming up to me and saying, I'm so sorry you have to work with him. Not saying that like Chris was bad. He just saying like, because Chris Masters was new and he was kind of green and he had broke Stevie Richards' nose like the week prior. And it's funny because I don't tell this. I've told the story a few times, but Arn Anderson basically was like, we know that you can sell for him, make him look good. Just go out there and do your best. And Sergeant Slaughter, another guy, when I would see him, years later, he was always very complimentary and friendly, and all the agents treated you well. I didn't have any issues with all of them. I think most of them were appreciative that you were there doing the job for these guys, and they'd give you a little bit of feedback. But like Fit Finley and Arn Anderson were the guys that if you wanted to get in the ring and have them show you stuff before the show, they would, and it's so much valuable information. But going back to the Chris Masters thing, I remember getting to the arena and Paul London and Brian Kendrick were friends of mine. Like, what are you doing tonight? I was like, I'm wrestling Chris Masters. Like, oh, dude, we're so sorry. And like somebody else, I think Jimmy Yang said the same thing, like patted me on the back, like, be careful. I didn't know what they meant because I hadn't watched the show the week before. So when I was in the ring, it was a commercial break. And then when it came back from commercial break, it showed on the Titantron, it showed Chris Masters sledgehammering Stevie Richards' face. And I was like, oh, that's what they were talking about. That was the first time I saw it when I was in the ring. So I wrestled Chris Masters and it was fine. I remember him doing that, that double punch that he did to Stevie's face. And I remember just putting my chest out and my head way back when I took it because I was like, that's not happening to me. And then I remember getting to the locker room and I had a text from Stevie Richards like, hey, are you okay? So because of Chris Masters injured him the week before, everyone was kind of like nervous that it was going to happen again. But I didn't even know about it until I was in the ring. That was the first time seeing it. So that's kind of a funny story, but Chris Masters was good. I mean, he's a big guy. How can you be light when you're 280 pounds of muscle? It's almost impossible. If your goal is to be intense and rugged at that size, I think it's hard to not let your stuff in. Right. So you definitely felt what he was doing, but the thing he did to Stevie was, that was pretty rough to see.
Yeah. Well, it happens, unfortunately,
Yeah, it does. Yeah, it didn't happen to me. So,
right. Now, who did you not get a chance to work with? Maybe somebody on the indies that you always wanted to work with. Maybe you worked at shows with them, but for whatever reason, schedules never came together and you never worked with them in the ring. Anybody come to mind?
No, not really, because on the independent level, I think anybody I really wanted to work, I have. Especially back then, like Samoa Joe, Low Key, AJ Styles, Christopher Daniels, whether it was in Ring of Honor or the Indies, I wrestled all those guys. And then even like some of the newer school guys, I got to wrestle. Like I wrestled Ryan Clancy recently, who's really good. Jonathan Gresham for Beyond Wrestling. Not really. There's really nobody that I haven't wrestled. I'm sure there's some guys that are up and coming today that I'd like to get in the ring with, but I'm at a different point in my life where I don't know if I'm going to, go out of my way to try to wrestle somebody. But no, for the independent era that I was in, I got to wrestle almost everybody that I want to. I mean, I'm sure there's some guys that I haven't that I would have had great matches with, but I can't think of anybody that was kind of on my list that I didn't get to wrestle.
2003 for Ring of Honor once again. The Purists, yourself, Tony Mamaluke, against the Ring Crew Express, Dunn and Marcos. Tell us about the Purists tag team, how that came about.
Yeah, I don't know if it was Gabe's idea or if Tony Mamaluke and I came up with it. I'm almost positive that it was Gabe. He said, we're going to team you guys together. And that was so much fun. Tony Mamaluke is very, very underrated because in ECW, he was kind of like this bump machine, right? He was just a guy that would just get bumped around, but he was a very good wrestler, very good pure wrestler, a lot of submission moves. So we kind of started this tag team and we were getting over. And then I don't know what happened. It just kind of fizzled out. I don't know if I got more of a singles push. Maybe Mamaluke stopped wrestling. I don't really know. I've lost contact with him. Somebody told me he showed up on NXT recently with Guido, like that he showed up. Tony Mamaluke showed up like within the last year. I don't remember who told me that, but I don't know if he wrestled. I think he just might have done like an appearance or something, but funny guy, good guy. And we stayed in contact, but we've lost touch. I don't know what he's doing with his life now, but yeah, he was great. I wish that tag team, if we had stuck with that, I think it would have gone further. It was fun.
And you mentioned Maverick Wild. You ended up working with Maverick Wild in the ring. What was it like working with him? He'd been around for so long, did some WCW stuff as well.
Yeah, Maverick's great. Maverick was one of those guys who would do innovative stuff, but also old school stuff. And he was just really kind of like non-traditional, but also like, okay, so he'd wear this robe and he'd, wear the traditional tights, but then he'd come out like, hitting himself on the head. And he was a character, but inside the ring, he was so smooth and light. It was the first time I had ever experienced that in wrestling, because wrestling the chaotic guys, not that the chaotic guys and the Kowalski and Hollow train guys were stiff. There was a little bit more rigidness there. But when I wrestled Maverick Wild the first time, like locking up with him, you don't even feel a thing. And I was like, holy cow, this is different. But yeah, Maverick was great in the ring, really smooth. And I think we had, I would say, probably a handful of matches. But yeah, really good, and good chemistry with him for sure. He was great.
Who would you say your top 3 matches / opponents over the years?
I don't know if I could one specific match, but of course Ortiz for opponent. You look at some of our matches throughout the early 2000s. I mean, I don't know if we had any ones that were bad. We probably had a few that weren't amazing, but he was one of those guys that I could go out with and have a match in my sleep. And hold on one second. Hey, knock it off. The dog's being a brat. And then I would say he was up there. When I wrestled Christopher Daniels for Ring of Honor, he was another guy, first time wrestling somebody that smooth in the ring. And Christopher Daniels, like literally, it was like wrestling water, how smooth he was. Same thing with AJ Styles. I wrestled him in a 4-way match and a singles match one time, and he's another one. I think AJ's probably the best wrestler ever. When it comes to doing everything, athleticism, execution, and to be doing it still at his age now is quite amazing. But I wouldn't say Christopher Daniels and AJ Styles, I wrestled them enough to make them my favorite opponents. So if we're strictly looking at guys that I wrestled on a regular basis, I'd probably say Ortiz, Wagner, and man, I don't know. Look at him. I'm thinking of New England independent guys. Probably Eddie Edwards. I would say those 3 guys that if I got to a building and I knew I was wrestling them, I'd be happy.
Yeah.
But that's not discounting anybody else. What's that?
Oh, sorry. Did you have a favorite promotion out of all the promotions you've worked for?
I like big time wrestling, because I would say not my favorite, but I had the most opportunities to wrestle stars there, and you learn more from wrestling guys that have been on TV. I mean, big time wrestling put me in the ring with RVD, with Tatanka, with Kevin Nash. Who else am I missing? With Just Incredible. I had the little program with Flair. Wrestled Spike Dudley there. I'm sure there's some other people that I'm missing. Who else did they put me in the ring? Yeah, I mean, they always trusted me to wrestle these big names. So I would say, from a learning standpoint, that was one of my favorites. But Chaotic, of course, from the nostalgia and being so early in my career, giving me the opportunity to kind of become myself. And then, of course, Ring of Honor, ECWA, those all have honorable mentions. 2CW in upstate New York, that's another company that treated me really well. Always put me in with solid wrestlers. And the 2CW fans were just incredible. These were the same fans that would go to these shows every month, and they were vocal, respectful, loud, faithful. Even in the snow, they would show up. So all these promotions helped build me, but I don't think I have one specific favorite. I think just that whole time in my life was fun, and they all played a part in it.
What was it like working with the great Doug Williams?
Doug was awesome. Another guy, smooth, different style, the British style. He was smooth, he was technical, but he was also he was rugged, and he was big. He's a big guy. I mean, Doug Williams is this thick 220, 230 pound guy. So I wrestled him in England a couple times. I wrestled him for Ring of Honor. I think when I won the Pure Belt, I wrestled him. And then I also wrestled him in some 4-ways or maybe tag matches. Good guy. I think Doug Williams was one of those guys that should have become a big star somewhere. He had all the makings for it, and he's done well, but no real big WWE run or anything like that. And I wonder why, because he was big, he was good in the ring, he looked good, and easy to work with too. Very, very giving in the ring. So yeah, Doug Williams is awesome. I don't know what he's doing now, if he's even still wrestling anymore, but you see him on Facebook sometimes. But yeah, Doug was fantastic. And I remember when he first wrestled in the States, when Sheldon brought him over for NECW, and I think I might have been on that show or maybe I think I watched the show from the crowd, and then maybe the second time I was there. But yeah, Doug was great, and seeing him bring that style to the States was pretty cool.
Yeah. And what advice do you have for somebody that's looking to get into the business now?
I tell people all the time your reputation is more important than what you do in the ring. Not saying that you shouldn't get trained in the ring, you shouldn't do the right thing and get in shape, get innovative, have good matches, stay injury free. Those are all basic. Those are all obvious pieces of advice, but have a good reputation. You know, I tell people if you have a bad match, you'll be forgiven. But if you're known as somebody that's got an attitude or tough to work with, that reputation may stay with you forever. So yeah, that's number one, is have a good attitude, be thankful, communicate with the promoters, try to really just try to really just become somebody that's easy to work with, become a good business person, and then in ring stuff, get in shape, look good, and try to keep your body in shape and don't kill yourself and have major injuries early in your career, because there's that theory that you have a bump card and you only have so many bumps in your body. I think that's true. It's different for everybody, but you see some of these young guys that are only a few years in getting dumped on their head every weekend, and so it's just not good. And
Yeah.
especially if you're doing it all the time, it's like it's not special anymore. So that's the big thing I've noticed recently, is that there's a lot more high risk, dangerous stuff, and it's a little bit concerning. I think there's ways to be innovative and stand out without doing that. And if you're going to do dangerous stuff, do it on shows that really matter.
Yeah.
That would be my main piece of advice, I would say.
Any memories working with Dylan Cage?
Yeah, I wrestled Dylan in Connecticut. Wrestled him. I think there was that one tournament up in Maine that we wrestled. It was like that New England Independent Invitational tournament. And I remember wrestling Dylan Cage in the opener, and the building was like 100 degrees. I wrestled Dylan Cage, then I wrestled Wagner in the second match, and I wrestled Maverick Wild in the third. And I think I did about an hour of wrestling that night in this non-air conditioned old building up in Maine. And yeah, Dylan Cage and I had wrestled before, but that was awesome match. He was really, really good in the ring. And I just remember that night driving home, and like we stopped at a restaurant. I couldn't even eat because I was so dehydrated. I drank like a gallon of water. That was a very, very, very rough night. But Dylan Cage was the first match, and we went like 20 minutes in the opener. And because of that, I think I was just that in the heat, I was so tired for the rest of the night. And I remember wrestling Maverick in the finals. And when he pinned me, I was like, thank God this night is over, because it was just so exhausting. But yeah, Dylan Cage was another guy, Connecticut mainstay. Then he started to make his way into New England and wrestling. Connecticut is New England, but he started wrestling more outside of Connecticut and for MWF, and then up in Maine. But yeah, Dylan was awesome. Good human being, good guy. I know him and Ortiz and Wagner, they all that little triangle loved working with each other, and add me to the group. He was fun.
Another person you'd lock it up with in ECWA was Low Key. What was it like working with Caval?
So Low Key's one of those guys. Low Key's got, out of all independent wrestlers, Low Key's got a reputation more than anybody, right? He was never rough or stiff with me. I think Low Key was one of those guys that if he knew you, he liked you, he wasn't going to be easy with you. He wasn't going to be light. He would still chop and kick the shit out of you. But I think that some of the other stuff that you see was if he felt like maybe the guy hadn't earned his due, he hadn't paid his dues yet, or somebody was disrespectful. I'm not saying I know firsthand that Low Key has taken liberties with people in the ring, because I don't know. I don't know if he's just stiff, but he's got a reputation. A lot of people don't care for him, but again, I judge people on how they treat me. He's always been good to me outside the ring. He's always been a sweetheart. And I think Low Key and Brandon are different people for sure. I think when he becomes Low Key, promoters and workers might have a different opinion than when he's just on the streets at a restaurant or something. But hell of a talent. I mean, when it comes to believability and ring presence, especially he's not a very big guy, the stuff he could do in the ring and how believable and how hard he hit for a guy that's that small on the smaller scale was quite amazing. And he was one of those guys that you watch some of his Ring of Honor stuff, his Japanese stuff. I mean, amazing. I think one of the most talented wrestlers ever. It's just, business wise, I don't know if promoters, what the reason he parted ways with so many promoters. I know he was in WWE, he was in Japan, Ring of Honor, and TNA, and I don't know if he's even wrestling anymore, but when it comes to talent, phenomenal. Business dealings, I don't know. I've never been a promoter, but there's so many stories out there that you wonder if he just, was difficult to work with. But if I'm going to give an opinion on him based on how he's treated me and I've been in the ring with him, professional.
Yeah. And you go on to Nova Scotia, 2003 for the WWE once again, Sunday Night Heat. Once again, you'd work with Aaron Stevens, and it's kind of a unique situation because normally an enhancement talent will work with a superstar from television, but in your case, you're often working with another enhancement talent, and it would also often be Aaron Stevens. A very unique situation. Why do you think that was that you were often working with him?
I don't know. Dr. Tom Pritchard was doing a lot of camps at the Chaotic School, and I know that he was high on Aaron Stevens, and Dr. Tom was trying like hell to get me signed too. Maybe he just thought that we were capable of putting on matches and not just being enhancement guys. Maybe he just thought, hey, these guys are ready for the next level. Let's put them in there and see if they can do it. So I think that's probably a lot of it. Also, Aaron and I both looked like wrestlers. We were in shape. And not saying that enhancement guys, that you can't be an enhancement guy and be in shape. You see all guys, all the shapes and sizes in there doing jobs. But I think, I think we were literally probably being scouted at the time. And obviously Aaron got signed and went on, but I think they looked at us as two guys that were there, and let's just put them in the ring and see what they can do. I think that's my reasoning behind it, but I could be wrong.
2003 JCW, you'd work with CM Punk, a young CM Punk. What was it like working with him?
Yeah, I worked Punk a bunch of times. That JCW show I remember because it's on YouTube now. It's like there was like 10 people there because I think it was a snowstorm, and I don't know if that was the first time I wrestled him. It might have been. Not much memories of the match. I mean, I could watch it on YouTube, and I still don't remember doing any of that stuff. But I wrestled Punk in Ring of Honor a couple times, singles matches, and then obviously once or twice in the Indies. But Punk was always good to me. Another guy we talk about, low key. Punk's got one of those guys where 20 different people have 20 different opinions of him. The way he's treated me, I saw him about a year and a half ago in Connecticut. That was the first time I'd seen him in like 20 years, and he's treated me the same way he treated me back then. And even putting matches together with him, never authoritative, never we want to do this. I think Punk's very old school, and I think that he's one of those guys that he wears his heart on his sleeve. If he likes you or he doesn't like you, you're going to know. And I just don't think he's fake. I think he's one of those guys that this is who I am and this is my opinion and I'm going to say it. And if you don't like it, tough shit. And there's something respectful about that. I've always got along great with him. I don't know where some of the stuff comes from. But man, like I said, it's wrestling. You're not going to get along with everybody you work with. If you work at a grocery store, you work at a restaurant, you work at a warehouse, you're not going to get along with every single person. And it doesn't mean that one person is good, the other's bad. Sometimes personalities clash. I think that happens a lot with him. But personally, fantastic. Yeah, good matches. And I always thought he was a good dude.
Do you remember specifically the best piece of advice that you received from Tom Pritchard?
There's a quote that some of the Chaotic guys still talk about to this day that Tom Pritchard said that everything in wrestling is ice cream, different flavors. Some people like chocolate chip, some people like vanilla. You may have all the makings of being a star, but then the person that's watching you might not think so because you're not their flavor of ice cream. You might go do a show in front of a crowd that likes the match, and then the next time they might not like you. Everything is personal preference, and some people like different flavors of ice cream, and that was the big thing: is don't take things personal. Just kind of get as well rounded as you can. And Mike Hollow always used to talk about this: the more stuff you have in your toolbox, the better. If you just have one move or one style, you're one dimensional. You're not going to be as marketable and as somebody who knows how to do everything. So I think those pieces of advice were get as good as you can at everything, especially your weaknesses, and hopefully somebody wants your flavor of ice cream one day.
Yeah. Now, we talked about the purists, yourself and Tony Mamaluke. Mohegan Sun, Uncasville, Connecticut for the WWE. Sunday Night Heat once again. Now you're on the opposing side of Tony Mamaluke. So it's Tony Mamaluke and Danny Doring against yourself and Chad Wicks. Any memory of that, man?
I do remember that match because I remember we did some insane finisher where I think I did the double knee backbreaker while somebody was on somebody else's back. I think I teamed with Chadwick's, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I think Chad had Mama Luke on his back, and I jumped up and gave the double knee backbreaker, and I think that was, that kind of, I think that was the finish. But yeah, I don't remember many specifics, but I do remember going in the back, and Vince Vitale's like, yeah, Shane McMahon marked out for your drop kick. You really liked your drop kick, and I had so many matches like that where I did these dark matches, Sunday Night Heat matches, SmackDown matches, where again, it was so early in my career, I don't remember many specifics that I wish I did. Because now, if I have a match now, I kind of remember everything. Maybe because it's fresh and it just happened. But this being so long ago, it's hard to remember too much about the match. But yeah, I remember it being fun, and those were guys that I knew personally. So we went out there and just kind of had this kind of 4-way match, and we did a little bit more than we should have. But I think we just kind of were in that position where, like, let's just go do a bunch of stuff, and we did. And you never want to do too much. You never want to be that guy that does an enhancement or a dark match and you're doing a million things. But I think we did a little bit more than we normally would have. And maybe because Danny Doring and Mama Luke were kind of these guys that were already known. And yeah, I do remember the finish. I do remember that. But other than that, again, it's so hard to put a pulse on some of this stuff because it was so long ago.
Any memories of ring announcer Bobby Cruz?
Oh, I always laugh. I always tell Bobby Cruz he's the most miserable human being alive because he's always complaining about something. He's always bitching. But I say that as a term of endearment. Bobby's a sweetheart, and I remember he ran some shows early in my career and gave me some bookings and ring announced for EWA. So we became close, and whenever I see him, it's just like old times. We just fuck around with each other and shit on each other, but it's nothing but love. But I love Bobby.
2003, they were testing out Chris Canyon's Mortis character from WCW. You worked Mortis one-on-one on Velocity. What was it like working with the late Chris Canyon?
Yeah, he was very, very nice. Yeah, I think they were bringing back the Mortis character in WWE at the time. And I remember it was, I think it was in New York, maybe, that I wrestled him, maybe Albany or something like that. I don't remember where it was. It might've been Connecticut. But yeah, he was very giving in the ring. In fact, if you watch that match, I had like more offense than he did, which really was kind of odd. But very respectful, very nice. A lot of guys loved Canyon, man. He was cool, and I remember him messaging me, I think on Facebook, or it might have even been MySpace back then. I don't remember. He's saying like that he had rewatched the match. This was years and years later, and he was asking me like, "Oh, was I nice to you? Was I a jerk?" And he was really like genuinely concerned, like how I viewed him. So yeah, it was cool. But when I heard he passed, that was sad. But other than that one night I worked with him, I didn't really stay in touch with him or have any relationships or friendship with him. But I do remember that night that he was super respectful and appreciative of the match.
Another Velocity that you would work on for WWE, you teamed up with the American Dragon, Bryan Danielson, against Spanky and Paul London. Any memories of that?
Yeah, I remember that because that one's online, so it's easy to remember some of that stuff. Yeah, Danielson and I think traveled up to New England together. I think we had wrestled together for Jim Kettner that show, and then we drove up to New England with Chad Collier. I believe it was the three of us, because I remember I was building a house. I was renovating a house in Brimfield, Mass, and I remember we spent the night there because then we drove to Albany for another show, and I remember Danielson sleeping on my floor with a blanket and being extremely happy. Danielson was one of those guys who would just sleep on floors throughout the country. And yeah, man, talk about a guy who really earned his stripes. But yeah, I remember that match. London and Kendrick were guys I already knew from the Indies. And then Danielson, obviously, I was familiar with. So that was fun. That was a fun match. I just remember that they cut a lot of it. I think we went like 8 minutes, but like the match online is like 3 minutes long. They cut a lot of the stuff we did, but that's a normal thing for WWE. They got only so many hours or minutes in TV time, so they cut a lot of that stuff. But yeah, good stuff. And whenever you can wrestle guys that you're familiar with and that you like on TV, that's always cool.
And what was it like working Dragon one-on-one when you did that for Kettner?
I only wrestled him once for Kettner, and then I think in 2CW we did like a 4-way match once. But yeah, Danielson's great. I mean, he's, what else can you say about Bryan Danielson that anybody else wouldn't say? Good in the ring, good guy. You don't really hear anything negative about him. He's just a guy who loved wrestling, went to Japan, went to England, worked indies all over the place, and then finally, got his big break and became a big star. But no, really, really good guy, good wrestler. And when you're in there, it's effortless. You know what's happening all the time because he's just so experienced. And he was so experienced even a few years into the business. He was already well traveled. So quite amazing how much he put into it.
If you had to pick one moment, what would your number one moment in your entire career be? Whether it be in the ring, out of the ring, but within the wrestling business?
I would say when I first started wrestling, I was in college. So this was probably my senior year. So this was probably 2001. Like a year and a half into the business, we did a show at my school, at my college. Kid I went to school with had cystic fibrosis, and he was very active in raising money for it. And we decided to do a charity show there. All the Kowalski guys donated their time. We did a show there, and I wrestled in front of like 1,000 kids at my college. And that was still to this day, that I would say I've wrestled in front of 20,000 people. I wrestled in front of big arenas, Lucha Libre USA stuff. I was a big star, the Titantron, the main event in front of 10,000 Latino fans, wrestling Blue Demon. All that stuff is cool, but wrestling in front of your peers at your college early on in your career was just kind of surreal. And I look back, and then we raised a ton of money for the foundation as well. And I would say that, because I remember I wrestled Wagner in the main event, and he beat me, and you could hear a pin drop because it's like, holy shit, he just lost. But then we did a battle royal and I ended up winning. But that reaction from the people at my school that I had just lost that's the kind of reaction that you look for in wrestling. It's when Undertaker lost his streak, right? Everyone was complaining about it. It's like, well, you want natural, organic reactions. There was not one bigger than that. You heard the crowd was silent. That's what you want. Some people are like, oh, you should have never lost a streak. It's like, it's not a real streak. It's a booking. So, right. I was booked to lose in my own school, and it was cool.
The Pure Championship for Ring of Honor, that moment, winning that title, what did that mean to you?
Well, winning it in Boston was cool. And because Pure Wrestling was kind of the foundation of who I was, winning that title in Boston was ultimately cool. And the rest, winning it against Doug Williams, who was so good and established, was good. But yeah, the Pure Championship was good. It had different rules, and I think at the beginning, getting the fans to understand the rules wasn't easy. But it was. I think it was a pretty cool title, and I did my best to try to elevate it. I think it was something different that Ring of Honor tried. Whether the Pure title was successful or not, I don't know. But people still talk about it, and I know I think they still have it, but I just don't know if they're actually using it in the other Ring of Honor now. But yeah, it was cool. It was neat. It was different. And again, it was at the time of my career where I just don't think I was that good. I think if it was a few years later, I could have done more with it. But anytime a company trusts you to be their champ, that's a sign of respect. So it's a good thing.
Now, we talked about the iconic St. Matthew's Parish Center. We talked about some of the matches that you had for the ECWA specifically. But what was it like being a part of the Super 8 tournaments? I mean, such an iconic tournament and as big as you can get in the in the independent scene.
Yeah, that was great. I remember I wrestled Psychosis in the opener, and then I wrestled Austin Aries in the second match. And this was before Austin Aries really got any hype. Jim was really good at finding the independent guys that hadn't been noticed yet. And after the Super 8, they kind of really started to explode. After that Super 8 tournament, Aries started getting booked in Ring of Honor and other big promotions. Just really cool because the ECWA was always in like the Smart Mark magazines. They had like their rankings and stuff like that. It was one of those promotions that was there. And then being young in your career and getting selected to be in the Super 8 tournament was pretty cool, especially when you look at who was in it in the past. A lot of big name guys. Really cool. Yeah, Jim Kettner was really good to me.
Any memories of Mark and Jay, the Briscoes?
Oh, good dudes. Yeah, when Jay passed away, that was so sad. The Briscoe brothers were those guys who were so talented, but when you'd put a match together with them, they didn't care. Oh yeah, whatever, let's just do that. They were so good at just being themselves and so much confidence in who they were that when they got in the ring, they just turned it up. But backstage goofballs, jokesters, funny, and I remember doing some Ring of Honor stuff during the pandemic. It was the first time wrestling for them for so many years, and it was like they were the same exact people the last time I saw them. Yeah, Jay passing was very sad. It was awful.
Big loss for the industry for sure, and he still had so much in him, you know.
Oh, for sure, both of them. Yeah, awesome talents, awesome guys.
But it's great to see what they've done with with the other half, moving forward. It's not like they just threw him to the side.
Yeah,
They
good.
gave him his light.
Yeah, for sure, that's good.
So, Sunday Night Heat once again, Rosie and Hurricane this time against yourself and Arch Kincaid, and this was in Colorado for 2004. Any memories of that match?
Yeah, I remember. I remember specifically that match. It was fun. It got good feedback. But I remember that was the night that Chris Benoit actually approached me in the back and told me he was impressed with my work. And I tell this story all the time. Shane Helms was giving me some feedback in the back, telling me to stay on me, be aggressive. And then I turned around and Benoit was like 2 inches from my face and told me that I impressed him. His exact words were, "You impressed the fuck out of me." And he was just staring right into my eyes. It was kind of surreal. So I was like, appreciative, thank you. And then he had given me his email address, and we emailed back and forth. And I asked him if I could send him a tape of my work, and he said yes. And so we would email each other every so often. But then I remembered as I got, I would go back to TV. There were times where he would not remember me, and then another time he would be. He'd go out of his way to say hello. So you could tell there was some stuff off, that his brain might have started to get fried. You know what I mean?
Too bad.
But that's what I specifically remember about that match. So obviously, Hurricane and Rosie were great to work with, but that moment afterwards really sticks out.
If there's a dream match you could put together, hypothetical, whether it be somebody from an era previous to yours, somebody during your era, somebody present day, what would that dream match look like? Who would that be?
Oh, for 1000% Kurt Angle, for sure. There's one guy that I would have loved to wrestle in a one-on-one match. It would have been him.
Nice.
Eddie Guerrero, those guys, Lance Storm, Benoit, any of those, old school technical guys for sure. But Kurt Angle, number one.
And for the fans that aren't aware, you also went on to WWE again, Sunday Night Heat, Tyson Tomko and Kevin Thorne against yourself and Chad Wicks, once again at the Boston Fleet Center. And you would also appear in Atlantic City, teaming up with Arch Kincaid on SmackDown in a handicap match against the Big Show. Any memories of working with the Big Show? What was he like behind the scenes?
Big Show was big. When he chopped you, it felt like you got shot by a gun. But a sweet man. I remember he told me and Arch Kincaid after we did that job to him that he would put us up in a hotel. He was offering to put us up in a hotel. So yeah, Big Show was a sweet guy. And like I said, he offered to put us up in a hotel. In the ring, I mean, that big hitting you was just it was insane. But I remember him choke slamming me. Actually, was a clip on Conan O'Brien. He did a Conan O'Brien show, and there was a clip of him choke slamming me when they were introducing him. And I didn't know that. And then the next time I had seen him at TV, he had told me that, you made the Conan O'Brien show. He goes, "I didn't realize I dropped you so hard. Are you okay?" He was just really soft, like really caring. And I remember we did a skit with him backstage where he put a burrito in my face too one time and threw me over the table. And just like in between takes, he's like pulling the cheese and the beans out of my nose, being real soft with me. So yeah, Big Show was good. I have good memories of him. And to this day, I haven't seen him since then, but I always wanted to thank him for being so nice. But the chop from him is vicious. That's something I don't wish on anybody.
How do you compare the Big Show chop to the Ric Fuller chop?
Big Show would chop you once. Ric Fuller would chop you about 6 or 7 times. So cumulative damage, I would say Fuller's were worse. But the single shot, the Big Show's. But that's not saying Fuller's chops were soft. Not a chance.
Right.
Those are the chops you bump and roll out of the ring.
Yeah, exactly.
You don't sit there like a sitting duck and keep taking them.
Right. 2004, you'd go on to work for World One with Steve Corino and Jerry Lynn against yourself and Spanky. Any memories from that match?
Yeah, I remember working those guys, Corino and Jerry Lynn. I remember, again, guys that were established
ECW stars and you're in there with them. Anytime you work with somebody that's at a higher level than you, it just you learn and you test yourself. And Jerry Lynn, man, talk about a guy who was just as good as anybody else in the ring. Really, really good. And he's an agent now in AEW, which is awesome. I saw him maybe about a year ago, 2 years ago, backstage here in California when I went to the AEW show and had a chat with him. And Jerry Lynn has so much to offer, and Carino too. Both of those guys. Yeah, I don't like, again, not many specifics about the match, but yeah, just any learning experience when you're at that stage in your career is good.
Now, I did some research, anything that I wasn't aware of, in regards to your career, just kind of brushing up a little bit. And I knew about the Japan tour. I knew that you had gone to Japan, but I had no idea that you not only teamed with, but also worked on the opposing side of the legendary Tatsumi Fujinami. What was that experience like?
Yeah, that was awesome. It was Fujinami's promotion. I teamed with him, and I also wrestled against him. And yeah, I mean, what a star! I remember we would take a bus from these towns to towns, and we'd stop at like rest areas and stuff or gas stations to get food. And Fujinami would get flooded with autograph requests and picture requests, and he wasn't even really that active at that time. He was a huge star in Japan. You watch his match with Flair back in the day, really good. And yeah, the Japanese culture is so cool, man. You go there and you do these shows and you go out to eat afterwards and they treat you like you're a king. And Fujinami was really good. And it was a one-time tour. I don't know if that company went on to do more after that, but it was just a one-time tour in 2004 that I did. I was there for like 3 weeks. And Japan was a place I always wanted to wrestle. So being in Japan and being around a bunch of Japanese wrestlers and then having somebody like Fujinami there guiding you and then getting in the ring with them, surreal, really awesome.
2007, you'd go on to Wrestle Jam against Claudio Castagnoli. Any memories of that?
I remember Claudio and I talk about that match, how I think we were both wearing red and there wasn't many fans there. I don't even know like who the promoter was. Do you know who the promoter was for that promotion?
Oh, geez. Honestly, no.
Yeah, because there were some promotions in Connecticut I worked for that I don't even remember. It wasn't Mike Milano. It wasn't his promotion, Jason Knight. It wasn't that promotion. I think it was a different one. But yeah, I remember wrestling him, and Claudio, man, talk about a guy who's just a freak of nature. I mean, the strength he has, and again, another guy I wish I got to wrestle him in Ring of Honor. That was the only time I ever wrestled him on that independent level. And again, it was at the point where I probably wasn't that good. But no memories of the match. I just remember wrestling him, having a good time with him, and he's a good guy and absolute hell of a wrestler. I think Claudio's as good as it gets.
In 2007, for 2CW, you'd work with the late Brody Lee. Any memories of that one?
Yeah, another match I don't really recall too much, but I remember Brody Lee was a fantastic guy. In 2CW, he was kind of a mainstay there. And then when he went on to go to WWE, that was so cool. I just remember how big he was. You'd see pictures of him. You're like, he looks like a big guy. And then you see how tall he was in person. It's like, holy cow. I remember wrestling him and seeing the video afterwards and looking so small compared to him. But no, good guy, really, really believable in the ring. And yeah, when he passed, that was sad because he's another one of those guys where everyone had something good to say about him. And that's those are the worst kind of people to pass. Anybody passing is bad, but when it's such good human beings, it's just like, shit, why did that happen?
Right. 2005 Chaotic Wrestling, you'd work against Brian Malonis and Thomas Penmanship. Did you ever think at that time that Thomas Penmanship would go as far as he did, obviously, as Tommaso Ciampa?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, for sure. He worked hard. Tommaso always kept himself in shape, worked hard, and then he really started branching out and doing a lot of independent stuff, overseas stuff. So for sure, yeah, not a surprise that he went that far. That match, I think it was kind of like a return to Chaotic when I teamed with Ortiz against those guys. But yeah, Malonis, Tommaso, those are the kind of guys that whenever I was in the ring with them, I knew I was going to have a good time and have a good match. And yeah, but Tommaso, no surprise that he went to WWE, not at all.
And perceived as one of the great heels in the New England scene. DC Dillinger, you would work with in 2006. Any memories of that?
Yeah, DC was another outspoken person. DC, if he liked you, you knew it. If he didn't like you, you knew it. Very genuine, and another guy who was a good heel. Yeah, I remember some of the promos he would cut in NECW. He was just just a jerk. But in person, in real life, he wasn't. He was very nice, very easy to get along with, as long as you weren't a liar and as long as you weren't a bullshitter. He was one of those ones that had that radar. If he didn't like you, you knew it, and he would let you know. And maybe to his detriment, he burned some bridges that way. But I remember hearing about his passing, and that was terrible. Yeah, but good guy, good matches with him, and he was underrated in the ring. He was, obviously better on the mic, but in the ring, he was pretty solid too.
Some other standout matches that come to mind, you've worked MJF in Chaotic Wrestling. You've obviously worked with Rick Fuller. We mentioned Dijak, Ichiban at Limitless Wrestling, Zack Sabre Jr. You've also done the UK tour in 2009. Any memories behind the scenes of the UK tour?
Man, the UK was awesome. Like I said, I'd like to go back there, even just to visit and see some of the friends I made there, because the UK is very underrated for talent. I mean, you look at some of these guys that are on the top now, and so many of them either wrestled in the UK or are guys from the UK. Germany too, because whenever I would go over to the UK, I'd go over to WXW in Germany and work for them also. Got to wrestle Zack Sabre Jr., Joel Redman, Doug Williams, a lot of these British technical guys, and it's just a different style over there. But man, the UK's got so much talent, and going in there and working them, plus going over to Germany and Amsterdam and working in these different areas, different regions. It's cool. I tell all the young guys now, anytime you can branch out and work at other places, other countries, do it, because you just not only you get into travel and have fun, you get into wrestle different styles. So the UK was awesome. I did 3 tours over there, and I'd like to go back. And I don't know if I would wrestle, but definitely want to go back to at least visit, because it was a really cool time in my life.
And for you mentioned.
Go ahead.
Sorry.
Oh, sorry. No.
So you've mentioned some of the stars that you've worked with, and for the fans that don't know, obviously you've worked with Matt Hardy, Carlito, Rob Van Dam, Bobby Lashley, Kevin Steen, the Native American superstar Tatanka. You had the program with Ric Flair, of course. You've worked with Too Cold Scorpio as well. You've also worked with Homicide and Samoa Joe. Any memories of working with either of them?
Yeah, awesome. Homicide's a legend. Samoa Joe obviously is Samoa Joe. Yeah, they're just Ring of Honor mainstays, independent legends, and then obviously Samoa Joe's gone on to do bigger things. But Homicide, man, Homicide was one of those guys. He was awesome to work with. He trained a lot of these guys. Sorry, yeah, no, it's just legends, hard hitters, but also really good dudes.
And you've wrestled, obviously, we spoke about Chris Masters. That was at the Providence Civic Center. Another individual that kind of had a reputation. You wrestled Hardcore Holly at the Providence Civic Center. How did that go for you?
Yeah, I wrestled Hardcore Holly twice. I never one time in the ring felt like I was that he was trying to hurt me, but he is snug and he's stiff and he lays the stuff in, and I don't have a problem with that. I prefer, but he was nothing but cool with me. I think Bob Holly's one of those guys. He's just kind of old school, grumpy, and that's just who he is. But in the ring, I never one time felt fearful. I never thought he was trying to hurt me. Nothing that shouldn't have hurt did. And the stuff that you would think hurt, like the chops and the hit, the punches, you felt them. But professional to me, I don't have anything bad to say about him at all.
Some of the other promotions that you've worked for: DPW, PWF Northeast, New England Championship Wrestling, and Sheldon Goldberg, BTW, like we mentioned, Big Time Wrestling, and CZW. 2006, you worked Chris Hero. Any memories of that match?
Not really. I remember wrestling Chris Hero, having a good match with him, and then friendly guy, always would be personable with him after the shows, but not really. So many of those matches I had back then, I remember they happened, but I just don't remember many details about them.
2009 for 4FW, you would take on Pac. Any memories of that one?
Yeah, that was my first. I think my first English tour over there, and I just remember how athletic he was. I was like, "Holy cow!" This guy was like landing on his feet from every position, and of course, I can't do that kind of stuff. But a lot of times, that contrast in style is what makes a match good. And then he kept himself in great shape, so no surprise he went on to wrestle for WWE. I don't remember what name he used there, but in AEW they put him back to his old name, from what I understand.
And as you said, you've slowed down. You know, you don't have anything booked at the moment. But what is next for John Walters?
Wrestling wise, who knows? Could be nothing. Could be a few more matches here and there. The good years are behind me by a mile. If I do any other local stuff, it's when I'm home up in New England, if I feel like compelled to wrestle. But as you get older, you have to start measuring risk and reward differently. And I don't see much of a reward now other than just having a little fun, making a little money and giving back. But I could do that without getting in the ring physically. So I don't know. A lot of times I just let my body decide whenever I'm up in the Northeast. But as of right now, there's nothing planned.
And in closing, fast forward many years from now, looking back at your career as a whole, what do you want your legacy to be? How do you want to be remembered?
I don't know. It's just tough to say whether I care about being remembered or not. I don't know. Definitely somebody that was good to work with, somebody that was had believable matches, somebody that wasn't a jerk, and then somebody that gave back, somebody that helped the business grow. Because there's a lot of people who take from it and don't give back to it, and I never wanted to be that person. But somebody that had good matches, that there was some believability in my style, and that ultimately the goal was to walk out on 2 feet and not get carried out. So I did that for now. And then, just overall, just hope people enjoyed working with me and that I was considered somebody that was easy to work with. Cause that's the ultimate compliment to somebody that's not difficult to work with. I think that's the ultimate sign of respect is when people like working with you. And I think it's a good way to go out.
Yeah, without a doubt. John, thank you so much for joining us. It's been an honor to have you here and take a deep dive into your career.
Absolutely, Joe. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. I'll see you soon.
Yeah, man. For John
All right.
Walters, I'm Joseph Bruen, and this has been the All Access Entertainment Podcast. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave your comments. We'd love to hear from you, the fans, and we'll see you all